having that strategy and then scaling up the sustainability and decarbonization in operations, rethinking business models, rethinking products that are coming, that will become relevant in 5 or 10 or 20 years from now, and starting the transition or the research in those areas, collaborating across sectors. We're not confined to working within just the chemical sector, but we're seeing, for example, the energy companies now supporting biofuels or helping the steel sector decarbonize. Similarly, the chemical sector is going to have a massive, massive role to play in the transition to electric mobility, to carbon capture, to reimagining, changing completely the agribusiness, the agrichem, the agricultural sector. Again, that sector is going to be affected by climate change, and in turn will affect climate change. And there's a lot of opportunity for the chemical sector in that space. So these, finally adjusting the business performance to in line with the physical assets. Where are the physical assets located? What is the risk to them? Will we have stranded assets because of the transition to low carbon fuels that are going to be used, or will some products become obsolete because there's regulatory pressure or stakeholder or consumer pressures that reduce their consumption? Or if they're being exported to Europe, for example, will there be a trade barrier? For example, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, a carbon tax essentially for products that enter Europe. So looking at all of these things enables value creation through the entire supply chain for investors, the community, regulators, the employees of the company, and all other stakeholders. So some practical considerations here. Again, on the left-hand pillar, building climate resilience. That's something that companies are required to do to understand the impact of climate change or climate risk on their portfolio, on their physical portfolio. So understanding, for example, the water vulnerability. And in India, I read there's a report out, I believe, by the CEEW that projected that more than 75% of India's districts over the next few years will flip over from, so for example, where there was a drought or where there was water scarcity, they will become flood-prone districts, and the other way around. Districts that were flood-prone will become drought-prone. And that's where more than 75% of India's population lives. That's where most of the industry is concentrated. So understanding the risk from physical risk of climate change to assets is very important for the sector. And with that, climate change impact is also has socio-economic impacts. Who are the communities surrounding the assets? How will it impact the community? How will it impact employees? The safety, heat stresses, for example, as we know, are reducing productivity. They're increasing health issues. Similarly, there are opportunities to leverage existing products and develop new ones. All these need to be looked at from a shorter term. Energy efficiency, low carbon fuels and feedstocks, circularity, these are all, I'd say they're already here, but they're rapidly progressing in terms of their importance in the value chain in the chemical sector. So the use of digital tools, digital technologies, tech enablement of functions of safety, for example, or a dashboard, for example, that looks at compliance, regulatory risk, when permits are getting, are expiring, new regulations that may be coming, sort of crystal ball gazing, all of that can be enabled using digital tools and technology. Product stewardship, again, for companies from India that are exporting to the Western economies, or even Korea for that matter. There are several countries that have their own rules. We are awaiting India's similar rules that will apply to companies that import substances into India. All of these, the aim of all of these is to build circularity, make them safer, less toxic, and so on. So all of these need to be looked at by a business. And finally, in the slightly longer term, electrification, hydrogen, carbon capture, all of these technologies will be major drivers for the chemical sector in the future. in addition to the basic chemicals, agrochemicals, a lot of the sort of growth in the sector is going to come from electrification, hydrogen, the sort of transformation of mobility, electric vehicles, aircraft, the materials that are used in that to make them lightweight, make them more recyclable for end of life, all of that. So this is something that's a massive, all these areas are massive opportunities for the sector. So there are 7 steps in our view that the sector can implement. And very briefly, number one is to reevaluate your product portfolio. What are the products that are going to get obsolete or will have regulatory barriers or trade barriers? And what are the products that you should be investing in or doing for tomorrow or the years to come? Shifting to circular assets from so looking at capital investment from that point of view, instead of having stranded assets, looking at what can you substitute virgin materials? Can you substitute recycled materials instead of for virgin materials? Or in terms of circular capabilities, when you decide to make a major capital expense, or can you instead repurpose an existing asset or retire a part of an asset? And how do you do that safely? All that is part of the circular consideration. Reorganizing the entire business. Consider setting up separate companies that are focused on on the circular economy. And because then the time to market in those focused smaller companies, you accelerate that rather than having the legacy issues that a large corporation might have. So, as I've said, there's a lot of opportunities in the sector, and it's important for the leading companies to seize those opportunities from brand owners. Brand owners have made commitments to decarbonize or to have a certain ESG performance or to be first among equals with their peers and so on. So there's a lot of opportunity for cross-value chain collaboration, cooperation, and also cross-sector. The silos between industrial sectors are really sort of breaking down today, because it really will take, no single sector or company has the answer. There's a lot of collaboration, cooperation between industries and government and think tanks and research organizations is required. Number 6, redefining and testing business models. Again, doing this rapidly. So to pressure test something, do pilot studies, accelerate the time to get to market. If it doesn't work, drop it, modify it, try something new. All of those are the business imperatives today. And finally, without building trust with all stakeholders, including the public, the communities, or the client or the customers, it's sort of a company, however, no matter how good its performance is, if it doesn't communicate and gain the trust or disclose, when I say communicate, I mean disclose publicly its performance, ESG performance, sustainability performance, and its plans to improve on that performance, you won't gain the trust of consumers. So these 7 items, in our view, are critical for companies to focus on in the coming years. So to summarize, we see these 4 pillars, integrating innovation into sustainability and integrating sustainability into business. This is a sort of a basic requirement today. We're seeing this more and more in companies in India, as well as all over the world. The second pillar is portfolio transformation, looking at opportunities in the coming years, what products, what lifestyle changes are being driven by climate change, by what consumption changes are being driven by climate change. How does the sector capitalize on that? How does it respond to grow in that scenario? Supply chain issues, supply chain sustainability, whether it's compliance with regulations, whether it's understanding the impact of climate change on the supply chain, or the safety performance, or handling environmental liabilities of the supply chain. All these are very key concerns, the impact on biodiversity of the supply chain, all more and more relevant and important and central to the conversation around sustainability of a corporate's performance. And finally, the digitalization is sort of an underpinning backbone for all of any company. I mean, whether it's making any process more efficient, understanding where the leakages are in real time, looking at compliance. There's a myriad of opportunities and functions that the digitalization and digital technology can help in. That if these four pillars or four themes are acted upon, understood and acted upon by the businesses, then I think these enable a company to become the industry leader. Thank you.